Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Dr. GPCR Podcast, where we bring you conversations with leading experts in GPCR biology. In each episode, we dive into the career trajectories, discoveries, and groundbreaking research shaping the field. The podcast was born at the height of the pandemic with three key goals: to share the latest discoveries, give researchers a platform to showcase their work, and inspire the next generation of scientists to explore this fascinating field. Since our launch, we've recorded over 160 episodes featuring incredible guests like Dr. Brian Roth, Dr. Robert Lefkowitz, Dr. Fiona Marshall, and many more. Our mission is to unite the global GPCR community, encouraging collaboration to improve human health through a deeper understanding of GPCR biology. Thanks for joining us in this exciting journey, and now let's dive into this episode.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Dr. GPCR Podcast. This is Yamina, and today I'm recording a very special podcast. As you know, earlier this year, we have announced that we became a nonprofit organization, and today I have two very unique and very fantastic people who are going to talk to us a little bit about what they do and how they help nonprofit organizations like Dr. GPCR. So I have with me Chuck DeWeese and I have Joe Saint-Germain. I'm very excited to have you both on. Let's start at the beginning, and let's start with Chuck. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm a controller, and I work for Joe Saint-Germain's company, Company Launch Partners, and I help him facilitate his dream to launch a bunch of startups and now nonprofits into their next growth phase and help them, achieve whatever administrative, finance, and accounting goals they need.
Thank you, Chuck. Joe.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you on the podcast, everyone. I'm Joe Saint-Germain, and I'm the founder of Company Launch Partners. So we provide startup or accounting and finance to startups and not-for-profits and things just getting off the ground. Great to work with not-for-profits, and Chuck's our not-for-profit specialist. So we'll have a lot of great stuff to share today.
Thank you. And I have to share this with our audience. So Joe, I don't remember who introduced this. I think it was Dean.
It was.
And you and I connected a couple of times, and we just kind of disappeared. And I came out of nowhere asking you all sorts of nonprofit accounting questions when you said, Yamina, you always find the time to email me when I'm on vacation, which I thought was, what's timely. And that's when you introduced me to Chuck. So I'm very excited to have you, both of you, on. And, we've started working together in the context of Dr. GPCR. So I wanted to ask each of you, how did you get into one, you, Joe, launching Company Launch Partners, and Chuck into accounting? So let's start with you, Joe.
Yeah, I have more years in finance and accounting than I care to share because I'm getting old. So I had been a controller and finance director for a company in the Marlborough, Massachusetts area, and was getting a little antsy, looking for something different to do. I was getting a little tired of going to the office and sitting behind the desk every day. And got introduced to the idea of being a fractional CFO and fractional controller through contacts in a network of people, and started working with a little boutique firm in the Boston area called VE Advisors, and was doing fractional controller work, so part-time controller work, as a contractor with the startup community in Boston, and just fell in love with it. It was something unique and different. I had started my career early on, actually, and had consulting exposure working with a large consulting firm. So this was very much bringing it full circle, and found I really enjoyed working with companies at the outset. Startups, just venturing out and getting going, and did that work for, 2013, 2014. And then when we got to 2015 and 2016, I just really knew I was something I wanted to do longer term. and started to put together my own business plan, and turned to my wife one day and said, I've got this crazy idea to start my own company, even though we have kids in high school, and going to have to think about college someday. And we talked it through and decided to go for it. And so in January 2017, I was registering my own tax ID number and getting started. And it took until about June till we started to, I wound down things with the other firm. And within 3 days in June, I had 3 clients. And one of them was a not-for-profit down in the Rhode Island area that really needed some assistance. So one of our first 3 clients was a not-for-profit that we got involved in. And so we've tried to always have a hand in that. So.
Thank you, Joe. That's fantastic. I'll have follow-up questions, but first let's go to Chuck.
Yeah.
So accounting, I ended up mostly in sales in the beginning of my career. So I was on the front of the house when it came to business and, transactions, working for Wells Fargo. And then my father always said, you'll only be as good as your last sale. So I ended up going and getting my master's and, just working in small businesses. Everybody wants that budget, forecast, bells and whistles. But what they don't realize is you have to have the ground, foundation, which is the basic accounting, which you and I kind of work through, Yamina. So that's kind of what got me into it, is just not wanting to be forced to always push and grind for the next sale. But the other thing is, I think Joe can attest to it, there's something really sick with accounting and finance minded people, because we get this accounting high where when you reconcile why something is off, all of a sudden you feel like the biggest genius on earth. And I think, it's why I golf, or other people golf. You hear that sound and then you just want to keep chasing that sound. And that's kind of what kept me in accounting, because it can make you cry as well. But that's pretty much what got me into it, is, just one step over another and building that foundation for companies.
I love it. When each of you were talking, I could relate to an aspect of being a scientist. When you get your result, when you've worked so hard and you finally see the result, it's typically 10 p.m. There's no one around you, but you finally figure it out. So Chuck, when you talk about really being able to figure out what the problem was and really reconciling everything, that feeling that you get when it's done and you're on to the next challenge.
You feel very smart.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Joe.
It's a lot like building a puzzle. If you like puzzles and you like watching it all come together, then you're probably going to like accounting. So,
love it. So, Joe, how did you feel? You mentioned starting your own company without having two teenagers at home. So it's a leap of faith. It may or may not work. You had the experience, but at the same time, there is still that chance of things not working out the way you want them. So how did you mitigate that feeling?
I'm not sure I have yet. Let's be honest. I think part of working with startups in particular is they all are kind of going through that, like a jump off the cliff mentality, almost to a fault. And so it probably did make it a little bit easier in working in that with that particular dynamic and with those particular companies, I'm a startup working with startups. And so I felt like I had a support system in a lot of ways. And learning that failure is okay. You learn, as long as you can learn from it and move on, then it's fine. If you think back to the sciences, in elementary school, I forget what it was, but you always heard the story of how many times did it take Edison to fail before he found the light bulb.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of what helped get me through it. But it's still, even to this day, is being a small business owner has a lot of risk to it. And it definitely has its moments. I do have an advisor I sit down with a couple times a month, more of a personal advisor that we talk about self-care and how to just individually handle the challenges that come up. So that's certainly a big part of it for me, having somebody around me to support.
I think it relates very much to mentoring and science. We talk about it a lot with any guests we've had, and I think it's important to find your people, to find the people with whom you can sit down, you can have an honest conversation. If you want to laugh, cry, whatever, you can exteriorize those feelings, and somebody who either has gone through that experience or has known a lot of people who are going through the experience to give you some advice, and also, I think, bring you down to earth. Yep. All right. So the next question to both of you, and we'll start with Chuck. How did you meet?
Well, I had actually gone from the nonprofit world, and I had been acquired by a startup called Fox Robotics here in Austin, Texas. And as they went through a new series funding with BMW, they kind of went through phases of shifting out old people with new people and new skill sets that honestly I just didn't have at the time. And so that's when, Joe was looking for someone to take it to the next level, has robotics company clients here in the Austin area. And so it made a nice merge. And for me, because I used to come from the nonprofit world, I always need to know I'm helping somebody, because it can't just be about the paycheck. So in a way, as Joe said, they're all kind of living by fire in a way, and living in the deep end, where it's nice to know that whatever I can do to lend kind of a life raft or a flotation device to help that company to the next level, I feel like I'm doing some good. And nothing puts pressure on you than sometimes like Fox Robotics, where they lost their series funding and their doors almost closed, knowing that you only have a month or two to save everybody's job, that type of crisis management in the startup world, because Joe can attest to there's a lot of sometimes crises in this world, unlike a nonprofit. That's also very challenging and fun, and kind of shakes the boredom up a little bit.
That's great.
That's how we met, in back to your original question.
Joe, how do you remember meeting Chuck?
Meeting Chuck, I had posted a position, and so she had applied for it. And I remember our conversations, Chuck, and to this day, she brings something very unique to the table for us, in a real problem-solving mentality. And as we were talking during the interview process and things, she was right there digging in, working to solve problems on the phone during the interview process, just things we were talking about. And I was excited about her not-for-profit background as well, because our current team didn't have a lot of that experience. And I know we've mentioned the word startups a few times here, but startups and not-for-profits have a lot of similarities. They both have to be very scrappy in the way they do things. There's a lot of need for documentation for different purposes. Early startups can have grants. Not-for-profits oftentimes deal with grants, and there's special, so the fact that she had some of that experience really excited me, to have somebody who could help round out those things on the team as well. And it's just been a joy to work together, as far as I'm concerned. It's really been great.
So mutual. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I love it. I know this is not your traditional Dr. GPCR podcast, but a lot of the elements that we've been covering so far also apply to the biotech and the GPCR community and science in general. So you mentioned, solving problems and being scrappy. Well, you're right. In a startup, in a nonprofit, you still need to be scrappy. Before we hit record, I was telling you about the beautiful purchase that I made
It's a very good one.
Yeah. In order to make sure that we comply to all of the authorities, to make sure that we're doing things right. And you need to be scrappy, but at the same time, you also need to have a network, and you have to go out and meet people. And I think, Joe, when the way you were telling the story around starting the company, you started out by saying you've worked in such roles, in a consulting role, you've had a lot of people to talk to, and then you made the leap. And I think networking is very important on that end. So I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit more about networking, or how do you approach this relationship building and in your field. And then we can talk a little bit more about what kind of services and what kind of work do you do with nonprofits. So let's start with networking in the accounting field.
Yeah. And networking, to me, nothing more than relationship building. And so I am out at events, different things, mostly in the evening because I've got my quote unquote day job. Just getting a chance to meet people, and sharing experiences, finding out what problems that they have, and really learning how to connect people, is what I think it's been about. It may not be like, I've had many conversations where their challenges have nothing to do with accounting. But I happen to know somebody who sometimes is in the room who could meet that need, and other times they're not, and I can help connect them afterwards, or make suggestions. Or I may not know anybody, but I can try to find somebody on their behalf that might know somebody, and just a little gesture of help to build relationships. You never know where things happen. And so I have friends who go to networking meetings, and they get discouraged because they're like, well, I got quote unquote no business from that. And like, well, it's not, to me, it's not about that. It's just about building relationships in the community, and opportunities show up. And sometimes it could be the next day. Sometimes it's like working with you, Yamina. We got introduced through mutual contact, and then it was like 2 years later that we started, and so that's oftentimes how it happens too. So
I love it. Chuck, I'll let you maybe add anything if you'd like to add.
I think beyond the relationships, when we go in with seed building, right? Or seed planting, knowing that it takes time to foster and grow that relationship, especially because some startups, they're very small, where just like yourself, they can do it themselves. And I think that's the one great thing about us, is we can sit there and assess and say, hey, you're not quite at our level yet. Let us set you up so you can handle yourself. And then when you reach a threshold of volume, then come back to us, and we would have already set up some of your infrastructure, where it's a nice kind of like handoff. So it's relationship building, and then just being patient for that seed to kind of like grow and on its own organically.
I think it's just, you've got to take the time to be out there.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that, whether it's a breakfast meeting or something, it's very hard to do virtually. There are groups that are virtual networking groups, but I think it's a little more difficult. But finding communities to connect with and taking the time to be out there. Chuck and I are working on a client now that Chuck's very involved in, that's dealing with women's health issues. Mm-hmm. And the way that came about was I went to an event down in Rhode Island, and I happened to be, they had a number of trade tables set up. It wasn't a trade show, but they had a number of tables. And I just started having a conversation with that company and that table. And someone else came up and introduced me, actually introduced my role to them. And it was very brief. And it was like 2 or 3 days later that they reached out to me and said, hey, we really do have a need. And so maybe we should talk. But just being present in the moment. If I didn't go to that event, that never would have happened. So,
I love it. I love it. I actually pushed it by saying networking and accounting because you said exactly what I wanted to hear. So our audience typically is scientists, GPCR scientists, from the age of 25 to 50, depending on how you look at the demographic. And oftentimes when you're an academic and you work in a lab, you're typically an introvert. You're very detail oriented, you're very focused, and the way people imagine scientists is that we work in at night in the dark, and you have the little headlamp, and I'm always in the podcast, any guests I have, I always try to ask them, so how do you go about it? And to your point, it's all about relationship building. It's about meeting people. And it's about just having conversations. You don't know if that relationship is going to end up in business or not, but you get to know people. You may be able to help them. They may be able to help you. And it's all about talking to people. We're networking right now. This is what I keep telling people.
Yep.
This podcast was designed to, one, shine a light on the stories behind the scientific discoveries, give the community a different way to showcase their work and inspire young scientists to contribute to the field. But at the same time, this is a super awesome opportunity to get to know really cool people.
It's true. I mean, when you think of all the scientists that you meet, and again, white papers and so forth, you have to sign up for that. And a lot of people don't have access to that. So I think your podcast provides just such an excellent access for the public to understand what's going on, because STEM is now more involved in the educational system and pursuit of people's passions now. So I think your podcast does a great service. So thank you.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to build a company from a financial standpoint. What does that look like? Let's say I'm a scientist, I have a really cool idea. I'm applying for a grant. I get the grant, and now what? And I want obviously a biotech company or maybe a nonprofit or something, an entity that allows me to use the grant and build it out in order to help people.
Mind if I kind of step in here, Joe?
Please.
I was going to take the first step and say, you call me, and then I kick it to Chuck, and she does
pretty
her
much
magic.
I was going to say the same. You help Joe with Company Launch Partners.
Yeah.
That's pretty much.
So then I guess the second step would be you put your money in the bank, okay? Because now you got the cash. And the second step, now you got it in the bank. And the third step and everything after that is you learn how to account for it. So if you haven't called us, if you think you can do it yourself, then pretty much what you need to do is, like what we've done is we set up a ledger, like the good old days. On each side, you've got the in and the out, and the in and the out all have to come together and net out to zero. And believe it or not, finance and accounting are sciences. They're different sciences, though. Counting counts the beans, and you have to be 100% accurate. Finance grows the beans, and that's the fun part of the job. But you don't get to that point until you count them. And so you have to just learn how to count your beans and make sure that if you've got that grant, that every single thing that you're going to allocate, whether it's for payroll, for materials, for offices, for other things like R&D, that you've got the right buckets. You're just putting the money in on your ledger. Yeah. Everything has a bucket.
Yes, as I also learned about all the buckets. And it's an interesting way of thinking about it, because you'd think as a scientist, you understand numbers to a certain level. But the more I sat with you, Chuck, the more I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is a whole different system of counting the beans and also of buckets. And it's a very interesting one.
I think one of the uniquenesses on the accounting side, and you brought up the word grants, and it might be worth, Chuck, just talking about that for a couple minutes, because grants, accounting for grants and what they require for an accounting with the grant doesn't always fit within an accounting system. It's sometimes a square peg in a round hole, and so it does create unique challenges. So
100% correct, especially because you have most grants are restricted. They're based on what you've applied for. And then some grants too, if they're not annual, but they're government grants, some of them you have to use all the money. They have different reporting structures. So in some ways it's counterintuitive to a startup world where we're scrapping for everything versus, well, hey, we don't spend this year, we're not going to get it next year. And so sometimes there's just a different mentality, but at the same time, the accounting side as well requires a lot more movement between the buckets. So yes, because you kind of, you're starting a company, so sometimes you don't have money you're generating yet. So you don't have anything to pay for any of your expenses, but then eventually you start to generate your own money at the same time you have grant money, right? So grant money is only something you can use based on the specific grant allocation. Money you start to earn now as a result of the organization, that's free money. That's whatever you want to do with it, minus ethical standards, obviously.
Yes, always. No, I love it. I love it. This is really valuable. What else did I have as a question? I think let's focus a little bit on the human side of things. You know, you both mentioned that relationships are important and just being able to help people. What are your thoughts on, we've talked a little bit about building relationships, but what are your thoughts behind, or what are some of the rules that you use in order to decide, am I going to be working with a company or not? And because obviously you want to have fun and you want to make it interesting, but at the same time, you don't want to take on a company with whom, for example, you're not aligned. And it's all about culture.
Company Launch Partners has a vision that aligns with my personal vision statement since I'm founder, and that's to have a positive impact on people's lives. And so that can be very broad, in how we execute on that, but have we made things better? And so when I'm evaluating whether we want to bring a company into our portfolio, I'm often looking at, what's the vision and purpose of their company? Does that align with something that's making the world better in some way? We've been fortunate that most of our companies have, fall very much in that. They all do. I've only had to turn down one company that ethically I just was approached about it and said I couldn't work with a vaping company. It just did not align with our values. And so because I didn't think that was making a positive impact somewhere. I couldn't find any redeeming quality about it. So maybe there is. I just didn't see it. But that's certainly the first factor and the primary factor that I look to consider. And we have a number of tech companies in our startup community that how does this piece of software help improve anything? And as long as we can see that that's a baseline for me. So I love working with companies that somehow have an impact. So a lot of social impact type of companies that we like working with also. So
I love it. Chuck, anything to add before I move on to the next question?
No, I think you perfectly said it. Thank you.
Oh, cool. So Joe, how many people are in your company and how did you approach building the team?
Yep. We have about 10 heads. That's full-time, part-time, and contractors. So we utilize a mix. That's probably, if I calculate that out to full-time equivalents, that's probably about 6 full-time employees, I would say.
Mhm.
And building the team, a lot of it's been around relationships. We have in a very real way, in a number of cases, there's that adage of hire for character and train for skill. And we really have done that with a number of our folks that didn't have any accounting background, but we saw skills, we saw character and traits in them that we said, you can learn this, you've got the skills to learn this. And so we've trained from the ground up, which in accounting and finance, there is a staffing shortage right now in a number of areas. And so that's one way we've also been able to handle that, when you can just find the right people and then train them to do that work. Now, Chuck came to us with a set of skills and experiences and backgrounds. So we haven't, we're not doing that with everybody. But a significant portion of our folks we've grown in that way. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of how that's developed. So, and the team develops that way too. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So you just mentioned, attitude and teachability, and people with whom you get along well, or have the ability to learn these things. Whenever you're hiring, what are the top 3 things that you look at from a person's perspective?
From like traits and
traits,
personal,
exactly.
yeah.
Yes, you bring in a team, you want to make sure that the newbie fits in. It's like a puzzle.
Yeah. Personal organization has a lot to do with it. We work a lot, across a lot of different clients. And so you've got to be able to bounce from client to client to client. So you have to be very organized. So we spend a lot of time, evaluating that. If somebody can, are they capable of doing that type of thing? We have a few working moms who juggle a lot of, when you're juggling sports and life and, all the different things, that it certainly comes, you've learned it in those circumstances. And so, that's a key piece that we look for. And people who are upbeat and positive, is certainly another key characteristic. Chuck, what else would you say?
Can-do attitude. There's a lot of times you're just thrown into the deep end, and our goal is to add value to the client. So knowing when to bug the client for direction before you try to figure it out yourself is incredibly important. I did want to just travel back to one thing that Joe said about how he has a few working mothers on his team, minus our finance genius, Justin, and Joe, the company owner. Of the 10 employees, we're all female. So Joe is just excellent. As he talks about, he looks for a character and then tries to grow their skill set. There is an individual on our team, Kendra, who's just epitomizes someone who had none of the skill sets ahead of time, just her thirst and her zhuzh for just wanting to know everything. And now she's trying to get her education in it as well. That's the type of person that Joe brings to the team, because she's just amazing, and she's grown her skill set just in the year that I've known her. But in terms of, Joe looks for a person who's thirsty, but also knows how to balance. And he mentioned the challenge of different clients. That one was, I considered myself an organized person, but he was kind to just give me 2 clients at the first onset. And that was good, because it takes a lot of shifting gears. And that in and of itself is a challenge. And as well as the organization. So yeah, that's what I have to add.
I love it. I love it. And I think everything that you both said applies to any team, applies to building any company. And I think it's important, even choose to applies also to build your own research lab at a university. Because you really want to make sure that the people you bring in have the thirst to learn. You need to be able to teach. You need to be able to tell them what to do and how to do it in the beginning. But at the same time, have people with can-do attitudes who really want to learn, who want to push the boundaries, who challenge you. And bringing in new people into the team is always a risk, because you want to make sure that the ecosystem you've built stays the same way, it just grows, and it doesn't become this place where you're like, oh God, I have to go to work with that person again. And that is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm just appreciative of our team is our team as a whole is very protective of our culture. Everybody, I've had conversations with everybody on the team that's initiated by them, that over the years it has just demonstrated being very protective of what we're building. And I'm just genuinely very appreciative of that attitude that we have in the company.
I love it.
And then challenged by how do we keep that?
Absolutely. So a couple of more questions from my end. And please, if you have any questions for me, it's not a one-way street. So please feel free to ask any questions.
When you built this program and platform, is this like the first, what drove you to build this? Like, did you see like a need that wasn't being filled? What drove you?
Yes, no, that's a fantastic question. So to be honest, what drove me is thinking of me as a PhD student and thinking of what was I missing as a student. And it was to fill a void in me, but at the same time, it's a shared void within the community. It's this need to be together. It's this need to connect to people who are like-minded, who have the same interests. And so it started out, I was sitting down, and I think listeners have heard this a couple of times now, but I'm going to try not to repeat too much myself. But it was a Saturday morning, and I was listening to this podcast called Consulting Success. And I was sitting at a Starbucks in a Target, believe it or not, sipping on the coffee and thinking about what can I do in order to do two things. One, inspire the younger generation, but two, to put my name out there. How do you differentiate yourself? How many other Yaminas are there with the same degree, with similar experiences? And so I said, well, I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about starting your own podcast. And it was all about going to consult on your own and what people did in the 2000s, which was writing a blog. And now people are podcasting. So I called my husband. I said, honey, I have the best of ideas. I'm going to start a podcast. And he said, yes, but what are you going to talk about? And I said, that's a beautiful thing. I am not going to talk about anything. I'm going to talk with people and get their stories, because everybody has that story of, something didn't work out for such a long time. And finally, the breakthrough. You're talking about the light bulb and Edison. We all have that as scientists. Not at that level of impact, but compounded together, someday all of our research is going to end up to doing something. So I sent emails. I did what you'd call a market research. And people are like, yeah, but no, I can read the paper. Bah, I don't need that. And others like, yeah, actually, it's a good idea. So I was petrified with the first episode. And thank God I had the best of guests who talked so much, who had so many beautiful stories that I didn't need to interrupt him. And mentioned about meeting and connecting with people. So my first guest, his name is Dr. Paul Insel, and Paul and I met in 2015, where I was looking for a second position after my time in New York City. And somebody introduced me, told me, you should talk to him. He's at UCSD. Maybe he can hire you for a postdoc, blah, blah, blah. And I actually hounded Paul. I kept sending him emails. And after the third email, he responds. He says, well, I was traveling. I saw your email, so I don't have any positions. So I actually faked it, and I said, well, I'm coming to a meeting in San Diego. Can I come visit you? And I was actually not at a meeting. I have to give a shout out to Anita, you know who you are, who actually allowed me to, who was going to a meeting, who shared with me her hotel room. And I went to meet Paul and his team, and we became, good friends. And fast forward 5 years later, he was my first guest on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
I love it.
I love it. I really love it. I love doing this because you get to know people, you get to interact with people. And if I hadn't started this, I wouldn't be here.
Oh,
This
wow.
is my, I come alive when I do this.
Oh, you can see you glow from within when you do. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I forgot my question, but that's okay. Any other questions I can answer?
I'm sure they'll come up.
Well, actually, I think my question was more about, we talked about company culture and how important it is to hire for the right role, to make sure that, people are teachable or they already have that experience. What I wanted to kind of get to is, how do you think about growing the company? When was that step, Joe, in your company when you started out, where you said, well, I need more help? Well, there's only a certain number of hours during the day. You started out as 1, and now you're 10, 6 with.
I'm smiling because it was almost immediate. I mentioned that, we in 2017 we were winding down things, and then within a 3-day time frame, just everything lined up, and I had 3 clients. And I went, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And I need help. And so I needed to hire somebody just at a, assistant level, a lower level, to just help take things on. And I didn't know what it was going to look like at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I hired a entry-level staff accountant to just join me. And she was very candid. She joined me and said, look, I'm in the process of looking for another role that might take some time to come to fruition. And so she took it on temporarily, and her role did, after about 3 months, happened. And, she was able to move into the role that she was looking for more permanently. And in the meantime, Justin Dill, who's our finance person, had graduated from Babson. He's somebody I knew through relationships, and just a young man that was starting his career. And so I approached him and said, Justin, I don't know if this would totally appeal to you or not. But he said, yeah, he'd be glad to do it. And here we are 7 years later, and he's still with us. He's grown tremendously, doing all kinds of new and unique things within the finance world. And so it happened almost immediately. But more generally, professional services is hard because it's very much a chicken and egg kind of thing. Do I have the resources to hire the people, and can I pay them while I go find the work? Or do I go find the work and then I got to scramble to hire the people? Like, it's very trying to bring that in balance. So we've been on both sides of that equation. And so that is the challenge that's constantly presented in growing. Our customer growth happened, it's been almost all through referral. So just clients introducing us to other clients, or through the networking channels that we talked about, and somebody referring us that way, or an introduction that way. But we've done, to a fault, we've done no external advertising. We're really even bad on LinkedIn. Like we don't do a lot of company LinkedIn posts and things, and we need to. So that's kind of a 2025 goal. But so the customer base has grown very much through just clients referring us to other clients.
I love it. I love it. And I'm happy to help with the LinkedIn aspect because we're very good at it. We've become very good at it. We just promoted from within. So we have Andreina, who was our project manager and social media manager, and she became our business manager. She's wonderful on everything she does, but she's really good at social media posts.
Oh, awesome.
More than happy to help. All right. So I have one last question for both of you. What should we title this episode?
It's a good one.
It's a tough one, right?
The accounting high.
Ooh, I like that. Joe, what do you think? I'll take notes. Good.
What the theme to me has just been about building a business.
Yeah.
Building. I got to be a little more creative. I'm trying to be more creative with the titles.
So I put in the accounting high and building a business. Maybe we can expand on building a business and best practices to build a business.
I'm going to refer it to your social media person to come up with a great title.
This is where we're the redheaded stepchild. We're like to accounting and finance. Our creativity is not really our strong suit.
Yeah. Well, so the story behind me asking this question from our guests is because in the beginning when we started recording, we were a very small team. I think we were 3, and I was coming up with the episode titles. And after a while, I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. So the episodes had the name of the guest. But then now the team said, we're now total of 10. And the team said, oh, come on, Yamina, we need episode titles. So I said, you know what? I'm going to just put it in there and ask people, what do they think? What should be the title? So I've gone through a couple of now. Please go ahead.
I think Chuck nailed the title earlier in the conversation, actually, in saying that finance is a science too.
Ooh, I like. Oh wow, I love it.
I like that. Yeah, good one, Joe. Because that's the
that's what you said it. So, but finance is a science too.
You extrapolated it.
Yeah, there you go.
I love it. Fantastic. Last question. Where can people find you?
Well, not LinkedIn. Clearly, I said not LinkedIn.
I was going to ask. Other than LinkedIn.
You can find us on LinkedIn. We just don't post a lot. CompanyLaunchPartners.com is our website, and you can certainly reach out there. Joe at CompanyLaunchPartners.com or Chuck at CompanyLaunchPartners.com can send an email. And you can find each of our profiles on LinkedIn also.
Yes.
So
that is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Any last words other than finance is a science too? I love it. I really love it.
Great. I just want to extend my gratitude. This was an excellent opportunity. Even though it's virtual, it's still getting us behind outside of our desks, outside of spreadsheets and accounting. And this was just very enjoyable. So I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been great to talk. So
thank you so much, both. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to stop recording. We're going to let people wonder what we talk about after we stop recording. Financial secrets.
There you go.
All right. Bye, everybody.
I need a favor. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button. And if you like the podcast, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Many of you come back to watch our videos but aren't subscribers yet. One click goes a long way. All the information about Dr. GPCR is in the description. Find all our fantastic features and everything you can benefit from becoming a premium member. And while you're on it, check the Dr. GPCR University courses and share them with your network, colleagues, and friends. We also want to hear from you. Is there anything missing from our ecosystem? Can we make it better? Email Yamina at drgpcr.org or email our team at hello@drgpcr.org. Thank you so much for joining us in this podcast episode. If you're still there, we also want to take a minute to thank our team members: Yamina, Attila, Montserrat, Cam, John, Yatsu, Mark, Ivana, and Andreina. If you like our podcast, you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Until next time, and stay safe.